Workshop topics: refurbishing a Myford Ml7R lathe. This is part 4, repairing the motor, wiring the contactor and reversing switch, and refitting the motor to the lathe. As I mentioned in the last episode, the motor was damaged by having to force the pulley off the end of it. And in this clip I'm refitting the cooler impeller in the correct position. And once I'd done that, I thought it would be a good idea straight away to give it a good clean up because it was very dirty. I'm fairly sure that this electric motor was not the original one fitted to this lathe, because many years ago I used to have an ML7R and the motor was very different. It was smaller and black. Also, the dirt that I'm cleaning from the impeller is not the type of dirt and grime that you would normally find on an electric motor's impeller that was fitted to a lathe. The dust and dirt contained a fibrous material, so maybe this has been on some sort of industrial sewing machine in the past. Wherever it's come from, it's a great motor. That's why I'm spending the time repairing it and cleaning it up to fit back to the lathe. The original plan was to fit a new motor with an inverter type controller, but really I don't need this sort of complexity in my life. My motto, based on past girlfriends, is always keep it simple. The less complexity, the more likely the part will run for longer. In this clip I'm removing the electrical terminal cover plate, followed by getting rid of this very sticky insulation tape. And after cleaning up the wiring, I fitted 2 pieces of silicone rubber tubing. These were originally part of a model airplane engine exhaust pipe system. In this clip I'm crimping a fitting onto the end of the earth wire. This is the earth wire from the contactor, which in turn, in the contactor, is fitted to the casing where it's connected to the main earth wire that goes to the plug. Time for an inspection of the motor, and it is in very good condition. There's no evidence of any burning whatsoever of the insulation around the windings. It's time now to reassemble everything and see if it works. Here I'm very carefully feeding the armature into the correct position in the case. All I need to do now is clean up the outer cover. Once again, this is very dirty, especially around the air inlets, and quite a lot of the dirt looks like black cotton wool. After cleaning the front cover inside and out, it's time to refit it to the motor. First of all, I gently tapped the cover using a soft hammer, and once it was aligned in the case, I refitted the very long bolts that hold it together. Here I'm fitting the motor to the main subframe. This uses rubber resilient mountings. I'm just showing how it goes together. At this stage I'm not fitting the main earth wire, I'll do that later. Here is the woodworm-eaten board that I carefully ripped from the wall of the shed where the lathe was situated. I don't really need the old fuse box, but I need to rewire the reversing switch. This is how I normally strip wire, but when you're doing it, be very careful. You won't cut yourself because you'd have to go through all the copper cores to do that. If you put too much pressure on at this stage, you will cut through the outer insulation and also the coloured insulation inside. You don't want to do that. Once I'd stripped back all the insulation, I ended up with 4 wires that go to the reversing switch. Here they are. You notice I'm folding over the wires before I put them in the block connector. This makes for a much stronger mechanical joint. All I have to do now is put each of the wires into the block connector, then strip back the insulation on the motor end of the wire and match the colours at the other side of the block. And eventually the block connector will live inside the plastic box with the switch. This thing is called a contactor. What is it and why do we need one? When you switch on a powerful electric motor, as it first starts it draws a lot of current, so you need to throw the switch very quickly. Plus you need some hefty contacts to handle the current, and this is where a contactor comes in. When you press the buttons, it energizes a solenoid to switch the power on and off very quickly. The high-power contacts are closed and open so fast there's no time for any arcing or sparking to occur. They're very simple to wire. You just have mains in, mains out, and the mains supplies the switchable power to the solenoid as well. These are quite foolproof and they can last a lot of years with the correct use. In this clip I'm wrestling with the earth wire. This is mounted to the case of the contactor and then continues down the mains lead to the mains plug. Or at least it will when I actually fit the mains lead. I'm not going to use the ancient fuse consumer unit. This is not necessary. When I first moved into this workshop, I had it professionally rewired by a local electrician. It has its own consumer unit with a corresponding earth leakage circuit breaker, or ELCB. So I really have no need for the original consumer unit fitted to this board, which uses fuse wire. It's very old. I could just buy a lathe reversing switch, but I have the equipment to do the job. I may as well use it. I'm going to screw the consumer unit to a board, but I do need to fit a rubber grommet to this hole. A belt and braces approach is always good when working with electricery. I don't want the sharp edges of the contactor to cut through the wires and short out. Everything's wired and plugged in, time to test it. When I hit the green button, the motor jumps. This is entirely normal, and it's the torque reaction of the sudden large mass of armature rotating. The reversing switch doesn't suddenly reverse the motor. You have to stop the motor, throw the switch, and then restart it, and it goes in the opposite direction. This is fine. I tried this operation several times just to make sure it was working fine. Then I stopped the motor and temporarily fitted the pulley. I only did this to make sure that the pulley hadn't been damaged or distorted by the amount of force I had to use to remove it originally. After starting and stopping it in different directions, I then left the motor running for quite a while. I was curious to see how hot it got. It did get quite warm, but nothing to worry about. The conclusion is this motor is more than suitable to power this Myford lathe. So for the moment, the idea of fitting a more complex motor and speed controller is not really necessary. The time has come to fit the motor back onto the lathe. First of all, I slacken off this bolt. This allows me to swing the mounting plate down to make it easier to mount the motor. I remove the pulley from the motor, and now it's time to have some fun. I use the term fun lightly. I prop the motor up using a large piece of wood. Then very slowly and very carefully I fitted the motor's mounting bracket to the main plate on the lathe. And that is it for this episode. I think it's time for a cup of tea. Stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.